Today, a musical legend died, an innovator in the field of sound synthesis. Dave Smith was his name, and he was the creator of the Prophet 5. This synthesizer was my first. I'm going to turn it on, and the only sound that I'm going to make with it in this video is the sound of it being turned on, because I want you to hear the sound of the power transformer. Can you hear that? I'm sure you can, because the microphone is nice and close to the transformer. That sound, to me, is comforting. And it takes me back to 1981, when, at the ripe old age of 14, I got this synthesizer. There's so much to tell about this, but I want to begin here at the end by talking about how this synthesizer changed my life. It gave me my life. Using this instrument set me on a path and opened doors that ultimately led to a successful career as a music producer, even producing a couple of worldwide hit songs, one of which went down in history. And now let's go back to the beginning. I won't tell the story of how I actually acquired it, which was via purchase at the music store in Hamilton, but how did a 14-year-old come up with such a substantial, gargantuan sum of money? I will perhaps answer that some other day. But suffice it to say, they were rather shocked at the music store when this little kid came in and bought the most expensive synthesizer that they had, probably the most expensive item in the store, and then set off on his life's journey. First as a musician, achieving a certain level of success with my high school band, and then later, very quickly actually, upon achieving that level of success with our first record, realizing that I actually wanted to be in the studio, not as a performer, but as a producer and engineer. And this made that happen as well, because in those early days, I acquired my love for working in the studio by first being a hired gun in other people's studios with the Prophet 5, playing on other people's songs on their recordings and seeing how the studio works and falling in love with it. And the Prophet 5 was essential throughout every step of the journey, including with the great successes that I had. This keyboard played on every one of those songs. I just love that sound. When I first got this synthesizer at that age of 14, I immediately became obsessed with it and spent all of my time tinkering with it, learning all of its intricacies and understanding the finer details of analog synthesis. And so it was always on, and I always heard that hum. In fact, I had it on a stand right beside my bed so that I could play with it until I couldn't stay awake another second, and then I would just fall over and fall asleep. And I would hear that hum when I would awaken again in the morning. It was my companion. Perhaps it's part of the reason that I'm so comfortable being alone, because I'm never truly alone when I have my Prophet 5. Anyways, Dave Smith. He was a pioneer. This was the world's first programmable analog synthesizer, which means that you could create a sound by adjusting all of the various parameters and then store that sound in a bank of 40 memory locations, patches, and then just immediately recall whichever sound you want and immediately be able to play that sound, as you can see me doing in many of my music videos. And his pioneering spirit was infectious. At that time, in the early 1980s, all of the prominent keyboard players wanted a Prophet 5 for that very reason. There was no other option at that time. There was nothing else that could do that, where you could just hit a button and suddenly your favorite sound for this song or that part, boom, right there. It was magnificent. And it is still an incredible instrument. When I learned of his death today, I felt a powerful mix of emotions. Striking me all at the same time. When I bought this synthesizer and he heard about it, because it was such a rare occasion for anyone to buy a Prophet 5 back then, much less someone so young. When he heard about my purchase of this synthesizer, he sent a photographer from California up to Hamilton in Canada to take my picture and interview me as the world's youngest Prophet 5 owner. And that was a big deal, apparently. And a few years later, when he was involved with the creation of the protocol for the musical instrument digital interface, otherwise known as MIDI, he sent me a preliminary copy of that protocol, which was instrumental to me because it helped me to prepare when I was transitioning from a studio cat to a studio owner, and I wanted my studio to be filled with synthesizers. And using that system to connect the synthesizer to the computer, I was able to have a great many synthesizers indeed, which led to those successes that I mentioned. I was the only game, not only in town, but in the whole damn country, where anyone could go and record that way, with such an incredible collection of synthesizers that I had back then. Alas, I'm retired now, and so I only have these two, the Prophet 5 and the Poly 6. I have a video if you want to learn a little bit about the history, the troubled history of the Poly 6. Alas, another death of a very close friend and musical partner. But when I heard of Dave's death today, it made me feel his absence, but at the same time, I had so many memories associated with his creation and so many blessings in my life as a result of his creation that I just feel gratitude and profound admiration and awe for his brilliant gift to humanity and his legacy. The world's greatest analog synthesizer, the world's first programmable analog synthesizer, and the synthesizer that, as I said before, gave me my life, gave me this beautiful, dare I say, successful life. And that beautiful sound. Isn't it amazing also as a testament to the greatness of this synthesizer that he made, that after 42 years, it still works. This collection of transistors and resistors and capacitors. The only service I've ever done to this keyboard is to remove the internal battery, because they have a tendency of exploding after a few decades and ruining things. So when I turn it off, all the memory is gone. But I don't care about that. And the keyboard itself. You can hear me playing the keys, but you can't hear any sound because I don't have the audio plugged in. We only want to hear the transformer hum. That's all. Anyways, that's all that I've ever done to this, is service the keyboard itself to keep it, because it's obviously a mechanical part requiring lubrication and adjustment, and removing that silly battery before it explodes. Otherwise, everything is original, 42 years old, and still works. That's part of his legacy also. He was a master craftsman. And I hope that all of the Prophet 5s out there, and Prophet 10s for that matter, and Pro 1s, and all the other amazing keyboards that he made, I hope they're all being used by master craftspeople themselves. May his legacy carry on, making beautiful music. And on that note, here's the legacy video that I made a couple of years ago for the 40th anniversary of getting this keyboard. Every sound in that song that you're about to hear, except for the computer voice, but the actual instruments, every last one of those sounds is coming from the Prophet 5, which is just amazing. An analog synthesizer capable of that palette of sounds, including the drum sounds. So check it out. And remember the brilliant pioneer genius of analog synthesizers, Dave Smith. Rest in peace.